Listen closely, because the way you have been taught to make a wish come true may quietly end here. Not with noise, not with force, not with desperate effort, but with a shift so silent, so invisible, and yet so powerful that it may feel like a hidden switch being turned inside the machinery of reality itself. Nikola Tesla spent his life obsessed with forces most people could not see. Electricity, magnetism, frequency, vibration, resonance, invisible currents passing through air, metal, water, and the earth itself. To the ordinary eye, the world looked solid and fixed, but to a mind like Tesla's, the world was alive with signals. And what if your life is not as fixed as you were told? What if your future is not a distant object you must chase with exhaustion, pain, and endless struggle? What if desire is not something you earn at the end of suffering, but something that begins to take form the instant your inner state aligns with it? This is the mystery we are entering today, not as blind belief, not as cheap magic, not as a promise that life contains no action, no responsibility, or no timing, but as a strange and powerful interpretation of consciousness, the idea that what you call reality may be far more responsive to your inner frequency than you were ever taught to imagine. Because according to this view, a wish is not captured through force alone. It is not won only through willpower, sacrifice, or proving yourself worthy. A wish begins to organize itself the moment you decide, deeply and completely, I am becoming this. And even more powerfully, the moment you feel, even for a breath, it already exists for me. That is when the invisible machinery begins to move. You may find this difficult to believe. That is natural. For most of your life, you may have been told that success belongs to the talented, the lucky, the privileged, the perfectly prepared. You may have been taught that dreams are fragile things, easily destroyed by circumstance. But this teaching suggests something different. It suggests that the universe does not read only your effort. It reads your state. It reads your expectation. It reads the hidden atmosphere of your consciousness, the vibration you carry beneath your words, beneath your smile, beneath your fear. And then, according to this theory, it begins arranging a future that corresponds with that frequency. This is why becoming is so important. To become does not mean pretending in a childish way. It does not mean denying your present circumstances. It means entering the inner condition of the version of you who already belongs to the reality you desire. The version of you who is prosperous. The version of you who is loved. The version of you who is free. The version of you who no longer begs the future to arrive, because inside, that future has already begun. The instant you touch that state, even slightly, something changes. Information begins to appear. People you need begin to cross your path. Events that seem random begin to connect. Opportunities that once looked invisible begin to glow like electric filaments in the dark. And slowly, almost mysteriously, life begins to move you toward the future that matches your inner signal. The future you are about to walk into may already exist as a possibility. You may simply not have seen it yet. It may be waiting, silently, for the moment your inner world turns toward it and says, this one, this is the reality I choose. So today, do not rush to argue with these words. Just listen. Because the idea we are exploring is this. When you decide to become the one who already has it, your desire begins to move toward reality. This is not presented here as a laboratory-certified law of physics. It is a spiritual and psychological mystery expressed through the language of frequency, resonance, and invisible alignment. But if even part of it is true, then your life is not a locked room. It is a field, and somewhere within that field, the future you desire may already be waiting for your signal. So let us open that door together. First, there is one thing you must understand. Whether a desire comes true does not begin in the outer world. It does not begin with the approval of others. It does not begin with perfect conditions. It does not begin with the amount of suffering you have endured. It does not begin with how long you have waited. You may have worked hard. You may have sacrificed. You may have forced yourself through difficult days with a smile no one understood. And yes, action matters. Discipline matters. Courage matters. But according to this teaching, the universe does not respond first to the quantity of your effort. It responds to the quality of your state. Your inner state is the signal. If Tesla looked at the modern world and saw towers, wires, engines, currents, and invisible waves, this teaching asks us to look at the human being in a similar way, not merely as flesh and thought, but as a transmitter, a living instrument constantly broadcasting belief, fear, expectation, memory, and possibility. The world around you may seem solid, but your experience of it is not solid. It is filtered, it is tuned, it is interpreted through the state you are living from. When you feel, it is already mine, Something inside you shifts, not necessarily in a loud way, not always with dramatic evidence at first, but like a radio dial finding the correct frequency, the static begins to change. The sound becomes clearer. The signal begins to stabilize. Imagine trying to hear a beautiful piece of music while your radio is tuned to noise. You can increase the volume. You can hold the radio tighter. You can become frustrated, exhausted, even angry. But if the frequency is wrong, the music will not become clear. Then, with one small adjustment, the sound appears. It was not created by your struggle. It was already being broadcast. You simply tuned into it. That is what becoming means in this philosophy. You do not pull the future toward you through desperation. You do not beg reality to change while remaining internally loyal to the old story. You tune yourself to the station where the desired future is already alive. When you become the one who has already received it, when you feel the atmosphere of that version of yourself, the universe begins responding to that signal. And then, the rewriting begins. Quietly at first, a conversation appears at the exact right time. A book, a video, a sentence, a stranger's remark suddenly carries meaning. A person you never expected enters your life. A door you thought was closed shows a crack of light. A delay that once felt like punishment reveals itself as protection. To an outside observer, these things may look like coincidence, but from within the experience, they feel arranged, not forced, not theatrical, arranged, as if the invisible architecture of your life has begun to rotate. This does not mean you become passive. It means your action changes its source. You no longer act from panic. You act from alignment. You no longer move as someone trying to escape lack. You move as someone walking toward what is already internally real. That difference is everything, because panic creates scattered movement. Alignment creates directed movement. Fear asks, what if it never happens? Becoming says, it is already on its way. Doubt asks, who am I to receive this? Becoming answers, I am the one who matches it now. And this is where the mystery deepens. Your desire may not be a faraway dream at all. It may be one version of the future already present in the invisible field of possibility. You do not have to invent it from nothing. You have to become compatible with it. You have to stop standing emotionally outside the door and begin living from the room itself. The moment you decide, I am becoming this, that future begins moving toward you with a force that may be quiet, but not weak. Quiet forces are often the strongest. Electricity is silent until it illuminates a city. Magnetism is invisible until it moves metal. Gravity makes no sound, yet it holds worlds in orbit. And perhaps your inner state, though silent, holds more power over your path than you have been taught to believe. Now we must go deeper, because the future you are moving toward may not be an empty space waiting to be constructed piece by piece. According to this theory, the future may already exist as one possibility among countless others. Think of it this way. There may be a version of your life where you succeed, a version where you are financially free, a version where you are deeply loved, a version where you wake up with peace instead of pressure, a version where your body feels lighter, your choices become clearer, and your days no longer feel like survival. And there may be versions beyond anything you can currently imagine. In this view, the universe is not a single road. It is an infinite field of parallel possibilities, like countless frequencies broadcasting at once. You do not see all of them because consciousness selects. Your state functions like a tuner. It brings one version forward while the others remain invisible. This is not difficult to imagine in the modern world. Right now, countless radio waves, television signals, wireless transmissions, and digital messages are passing through the air around you. You do not see them. You do not hear them. Yet with the correct receiver, one signal becomes music, another becomes an image, another becomes a voice from across the planet. The signals were already present. The receiver determined what became experience. In the same way, this teaching suggests that your life is not merely a blank page. It may be more like a library of completed pages, and your consciousness determines which book opens. The question is not, can this future exist? The question is, which future am I tuned to? Because if your awareness is fixed on failure, delay, rejection, or impossibility, then you are selecting the channel of the unfulfilled future. You may say you want success, but if inside you constantly rehearse loss, fear, and unworthiness, then your deeper signal is still tuned to the life you are trying to escape. But when you shift into the state of the fulfilled self, when you feel, I am already the person who belongs to this reality, the channel changes. The world you see begins to correspond with that selection. Your thoughts alter. Your posture changes. Your standards rise. Your reactions become different. Your attention moves toward evidence of possibility instead of proof of defeat. And as your attention changes, your behavior changes. As your behavior changes, your relationships change. As your relationships change, your opportunities change. And as these opportunities change, the outer world begins to look as though it has reorganized itself. This is why the teaching says, the future is not something you create. The future is something you choose. That sentence may sound simple, but it carries enormous force. Because if the future is only something you create through struggle, then everything depends on pressure. But if the future is something you select through alignment, then the first movement happens within. You are not begging the universe. You are declaring a frequency. You are saying, this is the reality I choose. And the universe, in this interpretation, responds not to confusion, but to clarity. This is why becoming is so powerful. It is a declaration without shouting, a command without violence, a signal without visible wires. Tesla dreamed of transmitting energy through the air, of making invisible currents serve human life. Whether or not one connects his real inventions to this spiritual concept, the symbolism is striking. The most powerful forces are not always the ones we can hold in our hands. Some forces must be tuned into, and perhaps one of the greatest mistakes human beings make is believing that only visible effort counts, while invisible alignment is dismissed as imagination. But imagination may be the beginning of selection. Before the machine is built, it is imagined. Before the bridge rises, it is designed in the mind. Before the aircraft leaves the ground, someone sees flight inwardly. Before your life changes externally, something must first become real inside you. That inner reality is not a small thing. It is the first spark. Now comes the question that changes everything. When you become the fulfilled version of yourself, what happens? If you sit quietly and say, not as empty words but as an inner decision, I am the one who has already received this, what begins to move behind the surface of life? According to this teaching, the moment you align with the fulfilled state, a signal is sent into the field of possibility, not a verbal signal, not a sound, a state. And that state carries instructions. It tells your mind what to notice. It tells your emotions what to normalize. It tells your nervous system what future to prepare for. And, in the language of this mystery, it tells the universe which reality you have selected. First, your brain begins to change. Things that were once invisible become visible. Information that once passed by like background noise suddenly becomes meaningful. A phrase in a conversation, a pattern in your work, a name you hear twice in one day, a small invitation you would normally ignore, all of it begins to stand out. This does not always mean something supernatural has occurred. Part of it may be the remarkable filtering power of the human mind. When you decide something matters, your attention begins scanning for it. The brain is a magnificent instrument of selection, but that does not reduce the mystery. It deepens it. Because what is attention, if not a form of energy? What is belief, if not a pattern that organizes perception? What is decision, if not a command sent through the circuitry of the self? Once you become aligned, timing begins to feel different. You arrive somewhere at the right moment. You meet the person you needed to meet. A conversation you almost skipped becomes the turning point. A delay protects you from the wrong path. A closed door sends you toward the only door that could open the next chapter. From the outside, these events may seem ordinary, but from the inside, they feel like coordinates. Then the people around you begin to shift. Someone you never expected reaches out. A mentor appears. A friend mentions an opportunity. A stranger says one sentence that unlocks a new direction. A person who is no longer aligned with your future slowly drifts away, not through conflict, but through distance. This is not because you wished and the universe mechanically delivered characters like props on a stage. That would be too simple. The deeper idea is that when your state changes, your field of interaction changes. You speak differently. You choose differently. You respond differently. You no longer recognize the same old limitations as permanent. And because you are different, the world cannot relate to you in exactly the same way. Then your actions begin to change. This is one of the clearest signs that becoming has begun to take root. You no longer force yourself forward with anxiety. You do not move because you are terrified of being left behind. You move because something inside you feels naturally drawn. A quiet impulse rises. A clean instinct says, do this, call this person, study this, leave that behind, begin here. That movement feels different from desperation. Desperation is sharp. Alignment is steady. Desperation burns quickly. Alignment sustains itself. Desperation screams, I must make this happen. Alignment whispers, this is already unfolding. And here is the most important point. According to this teaching, The universe begins moving before you can see the evidence. That is why faith is required in the middle. When the seed is underground, the surface looks unchanged. When electricity travels through a hidden wire, the room is still dark until the lamp ignites. When a frequency is being tuned, there may be static before the music arrives. So if you have chosen a new future and nothing appears to have changed yet, do not immediately assume nothing is happening. There may be movements beneath the surface. People may be shifting. Information may be traveling. Circumstances may be arranging. Old structures may be loosening. New pathways may be forming in silence. This is why you do not need to panic. The moment you become, the process begins. Not always according to your timetable. Not always through the route your ego predicted. Not always with dramatic signs, but something begins. And your task is not to dig up the seed every hour to see if it is growing. Your task is to remain in the state long enough for the invisible to become visible. But there is one force that interrupts this process more than any other: doubt. Not because doubt makes you bad. Not because doubt makes you weak. Not because doubt means you have failed. Doubt is simply another frequency. And if your desire has felt blocked for years, this teaching asks you to look gently, honestly, and without self-punishment at the vibration beneath the wish. You may say, "I want abundance," while quietly feeling, "But people like me never become wealthy." You may say, "I want love," while secretly expecting abandonment. You may say, "I want freedom," while carrying the identity of someone who must always struggle. You may say, "I want a new life," while continuing to emotionally live inside the old one. The universe, according to this view, does not respond only to the sentences you speak. It responds to the state you occupy. Words are the surface. State is the current underneath. And when your words say yes, but your inner vibration says no, the signal becomes divided. This is why many people feel trapped. They are not lazy. They are not cursed. They are not unworthy. They are simply broadcasting mixed instructions. Part of them reaches for the future. Another part clings to the past. Part of them believes. Another part rehearses disappointment. Part of them says, "It is possible." Another part whispers, "Do not hope too much." If you recognize this in yourself, do not condemn it. Doubt was taught to you. For years, perhaps your environment trained you to expect difficulty. Maybe you were told that easy things are suspicious, that success must hurt, that good things do not last, that wanting more is selfish, that dreaming too boldly invites humiliation. Those beliefs can settle into the body like old electrical patterns in a circuit. So when doubt appears, it is not proof that you are failing. It is evidence of an old program trying to survive. But this is where becoming becomes powerful, because becoming does not fight doubt directly. It makes doubt irrelevant. Doubt depends on the assumption that the wish is still absent. Doubt says, "What if it never happens?" But the state of becoming says, "Inwardly, it has already happened. I am now living from the version of myself who belongs to that future." The moment you inhabit that state, even briefly, doubt loses its foundation. Because you are no longer standing outside the door wondering whether you will be allowed in. You are inside. You are not pleading for the future. You are practicing its atmosphere. This does not mean you will never feel fear again. Human beings feel fear. The nervous system responds to uncertainty. Old memories return. The mind asks questions. That is normal. But now you understand what doubt is. It is not truth. It is not prophecy. It is not the voice of reality. It is a vibration from an old identity, and you do not have to obey it. When doubt rises, you can observe it as static. You can say, "This is not the station I choose." And then, gently but firmly, you return to the frequency of the fulfilled self, again and again. Not through strain, through remembrance. You remember that your desire would not have appeared in your consciousness if some version of it were not calling you. You remember that the future you seek may already exist as a possibility. You remember that your role is not to prove your worthiness through suffering. Your role is to tune. And when you tune, the field begins to respond. So please understand this clearly. Doubt is not your essence. Doubt is a temporary distortion. Your deeper nature is not the one who begs life for permission. Your deeper nature is the one who selects, aligns, acts, and receives. You are not here only to survive what appears. You are here to participate in what becomes. And the instant you decide to become the person who has already received, the old vibration begins to dissolve. Slowly at first, then steadily, then permanently. Now we arrive at one of the most fascinating parts of this teaching. When you change, the world around you begins to change its script. Most people believe reality must change first, and then they will become different. They say, "When I have the money, I will feel abundant. When I am loved, I will feel worthy. When I am successful, I will feel confident. When life becomes safe, I will finally relax. But this teaching suggests the reverse. You enter the state first. Then the world begins arranging itself around that state. This is a difficult idea because the senses tell us the outer world is primary. We see the bank account. We see the relationship. We see the job title. We see the closed door. We see the silence, the delay, the absence. And because we see these things, we assume they are the cause of our inner world. But what if, at a deeper level, your inner state is the blueprint from which your experience of the outer world is constantly being assembled? What if your consciousness is not just a witness to your reality, but a participant in its formation? When you become the fulfilled self, the cast of your life begins to shift. People who once triggered insecurity may suddenly lose their power over you. People who once ignored you may begin responding differently. People who no longer belong to your future may drift away without drama. People who carry the next key may enter quietly, almost as if they had been waiting off stage. Your life begins to feel like a theater whose scenery is being changed behind the curtain. The lights shift, the doors move, the characters adjust, the old props are removed, the new scene is prepared, and the audience, which is your conscious mind, may not immediately understand what is happening. This is why some transitions feel strange. You may lose interest in old conversations. You may stop craving approval from certain people. You may no longer feel at home in environments that once defined you. You may feel drawn toward new habits, new ideas, new spaces, new standards. At first, this can feel unsettling, but in this teaching, it is not loss. It is reorganization. The frequency has changed. Therefore, the environment must begin matching it. Think of magnetism. When iron filings are scattered on a table, they appear random. But introduce a magnetic field, and suddenly the particles align into pattern. Nothing shouted at them. Nothing argued with them. The field itself organized the movement. In the same way, when your inner field changes, your life begins to reveal a different pattern. This is why the same city can feel different after an inner shift. The same job can reveal a hidden opportunity. The same relationship can show its truth. The same routine can suddenly feel too small. The same day that once felt ordinary can become charged with possibility. You are not looking at reality from the same level anymore. Your perception has risen. And because perception changes choice, choice changes destiny. One of the most mysterious aspects of becoming is that what no longer fits does not always need to be violently removed. Sometimes it fades. Sometimes it loses energy. Sometimes a person stops calling. Sometimes a door closes so gently you only notice later that you are no longer standing in front of it. This can feel like rejection if you are attached to the old identity. But from the new identity, it may be protection. The universe, in this interpretation, is not punishing you by removing what is misaligned. It is clearing space for the reality you selected. The path must be made clean enough for the future to arrive. So do not be surprised when becoming changes your surroundings. Do not be surprised when your standards rise. Do not be surprised when you feel less interested in proving yourself to people who only knew the old version of you. This is part of the transition, because becoming is not only an internal practice, it is a switch that changes the relationship between you and the world. You become different, and then the world must meet you differently. That is the hidden mechanics of transformation. By now, you may be beginning to understand the central claim of this teaching. Your desire is not waiting for permission from the world. It is waiting for selection from you. When you choose the future, when you become the version of yourself who belongs to it, the universe cannot continue treating you as though you chose something else. This is the poetic way to describe it. The universe cannot reject the future you have truly become. Again, this is not a scientific guarantee in the ordinary sense. It is a spiritual principle, a mystery of consciousness, a way of understanding the relationship between inner state and lived experience. But within that framework, the idea is powerful. Once a future is selected with full inner alignment, the universe begins gathering the people, events, signals, and conditions that correspond with it. Your path begins to narrow, not as limitation, but as focus. Too many possibilities once made you scattered. Too many doubts once made you hesitate. Too many voices once pulled you away from yourself. But when you become, the unnecessary begins falling away. You start sensing what belongs and what does not. You start hearing truth more clearly. You start recognizing the difference between fear and intuition. You start moving with a quiet certainty that does not need applause. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. The future you choose begins to protect itself. Certain opportunities vanish because they were distractions. Certain delays occur because the timing was not yet precise. Certain disappointments reveal themselves as redirections. Certain endings become the very reason the correct beginning could arrive. Human beings often call these things failure, but in this view, the universe does not operate by failure. It operates by adjustment. A route change. A meeting is postponed. A person leaves. A plan collapses. A door closes. And the mind says, it is over. But the field may be saying, not this way, not this door, not this person. The future you selected requires a cleaner path. This is why you must be careful not to judge the process too early. You may not know, in the middle of the story, which event is carrying you forward. Sometimes the thing you begged to keep would have kept you small. Sometimes the thing you feared losing was blocking the next version of your life. Sometimes the delay was aligning timing you could not see. Sometimes the silence was preparing you to hear something greater. The selected future does not always arrive by the route you imagined, but if you remain aligned, it keeps approaching. This is why the original teaching says your wish is certain once you truly become the one who has it. Because the moment your consciousness stops arguing with that future, all the forces of your life begin bending toward it. Not always instantly, not always visibly, not always comfortably, but inevitably, from the perspective of the chosen state. The future already exists in the field of possibility. It waits for resonance. When you match it, it begins moving closer. When you doubt it, you tune away. When you return to it, the signal strengthens. That is the discipline. Not forcing, not begging, not obsessing. Returning to the state, returning to the inner certainty, returning to the identity of the one who has already received. And when you do this consistently, your life begins to develop a strange coherence. Events connect, people align, ideas arrive, your courage increases, your path clarifies. The world begins to look less like chaos and more like coded instruction, as though existence itself is answering the frequency you have finally dared to transmit. And now we come to the final truth. You were not born merely to wait for the future. You were born to participate in its creation, not through domination, not through desperation, not through fear, but through consciousness, decision, emotion, vision, and aligned movement. Most people wait for the future to arrive before they allow themselves to feel joy. They say, when it happens, then I will be grateful. When I receive it, then I will relax. When I see proof, then I will believe. When the world changes, then I will change. But the universe, according to this teaching, works in reverse. You feel the joy first, and then the joyful future begins to take form. You feel abundance first, and then abundance finds paths into your life. You feel love first, and then love becomes visible in people, places, and moments. You feel freedom first, and then you begin making choices that open the door to freedom. Reality is not only what happened before, it is also the echo of what you are being now. The life in front of you reflects past states, past assumptions, past decisions, past fears, and past identities. But your next reality is being shaped by your present state. Right now, in this moment, the future is listening. So ask yourself, how would the fulfilled version of me breathe? How would that version walk into a room? How would that version speak to themselves? What would they no longer tolerate? What would they choose today, even in a small way? What would they stop chasing because they already know it is coming? What would they begin doing because they trust the path beneath their feet? This is how you live from the fulfilled future, not by pretending nothing needs to be done, not by ignoring reality, not by denying pain, but by letting the future version of you begin influencing the present version of you. A little more peace, a little more confidence, a little more clarity, a little more dignity, a little more willingness to act from the new identity instead of the old wound. These small shifts are not small, they are changes in the signal, and when the signal changes, the receiver changes. When the receiver changes, the world you experience changes. This is the moment where you move from wanting to receiving, and from receiving to creating. Because your deepest role is not simply to collect wishes from the universe, like gifts from a distant power. Your deeper role is to become conscious of the way your state participates in the unfolding of reality. Your emotions become instructions, your decisions become coordinates, your expectations become magnets, your imagination becomes a laboratory, your identity becomes the blueprint. This is why you must guard the inner world, not with fear, not with obsession, but with reverence, because your inner world is not empty, it is not meaningless, it is not private noise. It is the chamber where futures are selected. If you are chaotic inside, the world often appears chaotic. If you are divided inside, the path often appears divided. If you become clear inside, the next step often becomes clear outside. If you become luminous inside, reality begins to reflect light back to you in unexpected forms. You are not only the receiver of life, you are one of its transmitters. And when you understand this, you no longer need to kneel before circumstances as if they are gods. You no longer need to ask the old world whether the new world is allowed. You choose. You become. You align. You act. And then you watch as the invisible begins, slowly and unmistakably, to become visible. So now, as this message reaches its end, let us return to the beginning. Your desire is not as far away as you feared. It may already exist as a possibility, waiting in the unseen field, waiting for your attention, waiting for your belief, waiting for your nervous system to stop rejecting it, waiting for your identity to stop saying "not me" and begin saying, "Yes, this is the future I choose." You do not have to know every step. The seed does not understand the entire forest. The spark does not understand the entire storm. The first note does not contain the entire symphony, yet without it, the music never begins. Your first note is the decision. I become. Not someday. Not when the evidence is perfect. Not when doubt disappears forever. Now, you become in the quiet. You become before the applause. You become before the world recognizes you. You become before the outer proof arrives. Because the outer proof is often the last thing to appear. The invisible moves first, then the visible follows. This is the hidden rhythm of transformation. So if a part of you still doubts, let it be there without worshipping it. If a part of you is afraid, hold it gently without handing it the controls. If a part of you still remembers disappointment, do not argue with that memory. Simply choose again. Return to the frequency. Return to the fulfilled self. Return to the inner statement. The future I desire is not outside of me. I am aligning with it now. And as you do, observe your life. Observe the people who appear. Observe the doors that open. Observe the ideas that return again and again. Observe the old patterns that no longer feel natural. Observe the strange timing, the quiet guidance, the sudden clarity. Do not force everything to look miraculous. Some miracles arrive disguised as ordinary decisions. A message you finally send. A habit you quietly begin. A boundary you calmly set. A chance you finally accept. A place you finally leave. A dream you finally stop apologizing for. This is how the future enters. Not always through thunder, sometimes through a whisper. But make no mistake, when the inner state changes, life cannot remain exactly as it was. Your future has already begun moving. You may not see the full structure yet, but the current is alive. The hidden wires are carrying energy. The field is adjusting. The signal has been sent. And from this moment forward, your work is not to beg the universe. Your work is to remember who you are becoming. You are not the abandoned version waiting outside the gate. You are not the fearful version counting reasons it cannot happen. You are not the exhausted version trying to purchase worthiness through suffering. You are the one who chooses. You are the one who tunes. You are the one who becomes. And if this teaching is even partly true, then your life is far more responsive, far more mysterious, and far more electric than you were ever told. Thank you for staying with this message until the end. The fact that you heard these words at this moment may not be something we can prove as destiny, but perhaps, in the quiet language of your own life, it means something. Perhaps some future version of you was already calling, asking you to remember that the door was never as locked as it seemed. Maybe this message did not give you something new. Maybe it returned something ancient. The sense that your inner world matters. The sense that your future is not dead. The sense that invisible forces move before visible evidence arrives. The sense that you are not powerless inside your own story. If, while listening, your heart became a little lighter, if your breath became a little easier, if even one small flame of hope returned to a place inside you that had gone quiet, then let that feeling remain. Do not dismiss it. That small warmth may be the first signal of a new alignment. You do not need to rush. You do not need to force. You do not need to prove everything tonight. Simply carry the state. Carry it gently, like a lamp through a dark corridor. Your future does not require panic from you. It requires presence. It requires a decision. It requires the courage to stop identifying with the version of yourself who never receives, and begin living from the version who is already being guided. And even if you do not fully believe in yourself yet, consider this. The future you desire may already believe in you. It may already be moving toward you. It may already be arranging the next sign, the next meeting, the next opportunity, the next quiet realization. It may already be closer than your fear allows you to see. So walk calmly. Walk with attention. Walk as though the world is listening to the frequency you carry. Because from this point forward, you are not merely waiting for life to happen. You are transmitting. You are selecting. You are becoming. And somewhere in the unseen field of possibility, the reality you chose has begun to answer.